The desert evening was slowly turning quiet as the sun dropped behind the red hills. Luke, a young cowboy with a calm face and steady hands, rode his horse along the narrow trail leading toward his ranch. He had spent the entire day delivering supplies to a nearby camp and was tired, but he did not mind long rides. The open land always felt peaceful to him, even when the air was hot and dry. What he did not expect that night was something that would stay in his memory for years. As he moved through the canyon, he noticed a strange flicker of light far ahead. At first he thought it might be a campfire, but the flame looked weak, almost as if someone had tried to light it, but didn't have the strength to keep it going. Luke slowed his horse and studied the area. The land was empty, and there were no voices or movements. He could easily have ignored it and gone home, but something inside him told him to look closer. He gently pulled the reins and guided his horse toward the flicker. The wind carried a faint sound, almost like a soft cry. Luke tightened his grip on the reins. Someone was out there and needed help. As he came closer, he saw a figure sitting on the ground near a small fire that was about to die. The person looked tired, hurt, and barely able to sit upright. When Luke stepped down from his horse and walked a little closer, the dim light made the situation clearer. It was a young Apache woman. Her dark hair was tangled, her clothes carried dust, and she was holding her ankle as if in pain. Luke paused for a moment, unsure if she would trust him. In those times, people from different groups often stayed apart, sometimes because of past disagreements, sometimes just because they lived very different lives. But the look on her face was not guarded or angry. It was the look of someone who needed help and had run out of strength. He moved slowly so he would not scare her. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. The woman lifted her eyes. She seemed surprised to see someone, especially a cowboy on a lonely trail at night. For a moment she did not speak, as if trying to decide whether it was safe to trust him. Then she nodded weakly. "My ankle," she whispered. "I fell. I tried to walk, but I could not." Luke knelt beside her and carefully checked her ankle. It was swollen, and she winced when he touched it. "You shouldn't stay here alone," he said softly. "The desert gets cold at night. Let me help you. Thank you for watching." Things were more. "The desert gets cold at night. Let me help you." She looked unsure, but pain and exhaustion made the choice for her. She gave a small nod. Luke gently helped her up, supporting her weight as he brought her toward his horse. She tried to stand on her own but nearly fell again. Without hesitation, Luke lifted her up with steady arms and placed her carefully on the horse's saddle. She watched him with a mixture of surprise and confusion. Cowboys were not always trusted by her people, but this one did not seem dangerous. His eyes were calm and kind. Once Luke climbed onto the horse behind her, he wrapped one arm lightly around her waist to keep her steady. The contact made her stiffen for a moment, but she slowly relaxed when she realized he was just trying to prevent her from falling. "My name is Luke," he said quietly. "I'll take you somewhere safe." She took a moment before answering. "Tala," she said softly. "My name is Tala." Luke guided the horse carefully over the rocky path. The night air grew colder, and the sound of hooves echoed through the canyon. Tala leaned forward slightly, trying to stay balanced without putting weight on her injured leg. Luke noticed she shivered once and took his jacket off, placing it around her shoulders. She looked at him again, surprised by his thoughtfulness. "You don't have to be afraid," Luke said. "I'm just helping." "I'm not afraid," she replied quietly. "Just tired." They rode for a long time. The stars began to appear above them, bright and steady in the dark sky. Luke felt responsible for her safety. Even though he didn't know her story, all he knew was that she had been alone, hurt, and trying to survive. He admired her strength. Many people would have given up, but Tala had pushed through the pain until she had no choice but to stop. Luke eventually reached a small abandoned shelter that he used during long travels. It wasn't much, just a wooden frame and a roof, with a spot for a fire and some old blankets, but it was better than leaving her outside in the cold night. He stopped the horse, stepped down, and helped Tala down carefully. Her injured ankle made it impossible for her to stand, so Luke lifted her again, carrying her inside the shelter and setting her gently on a blanket. Tala watched him with cautious eyes. No one from outside her people had ever shown her such care. She expected him to leave her there, but he stayed. He lit a brighter fire, brought water from a nearby barrel, and gave her a clean cloth to wrap around her ankle. He spoke very little, but everything he did was thoughtful and steady. "Why did you help me?" Tala asked after a few minutes of silence. Luke looked at her as he placed more wood in the fire. "Because someone needed help," he said simply. "That's reason enough." Her eyes softened. His answer was honest. Many people helped only when it benefited them. But Luke had nothing to gain by stopping for her. He had given her warmth, water, and safety without asking anything in return. As the fire warmed the room, Tala slowly relaxed. Luke stayed seated near the doorway, keeping watch on the surroundings. He wanted to make sure no animals or strangers approached during the night. She noticed how alert he remained, even though he must have been tired from his long day of work. "You're not sleeping?" she asked. "Not tonight," he replied. "I'll stay awake so nothing bothers you." Tala felt a kind of comfort she had not expected. She had been strong all her life, able to care for herself and others. But on that night, when her body failed her, a stranger became her protection. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened to the crackling of the fire. The pain in her ankle still throbbed, but now it felt bearable. She sensed she was safe. Luke glanced at her from time to time. Even in her weakened state, she carried a quiet strength. Her expression was calm but alert, as if she had learned to read the world carefully. He wondered what had brought her so far from her community, and why she had been alone. But he did not ask. He believed she would share her story only when she felt ready. Hours passed. The fire glowed brighter, the wind softened, and Tala slowly drifted toward sleep. Before she fully closed her eyes, she whispered, "Thank you, Luke." He gave a small nod. "Rest. You're safe now." He meant it, and Tala believed him. That night, under the silent desert sky, the path of a cowboy and an Apache woman crossed. In a way neither expected. Luke did not know how important this night would become in her life. Tala did not know that she would remember this kindness for years, but as they sat in that old shelter, brought together by chance and guided by compassion, something quiet and meaningful began, a moment that would stay with both of them forever. Years passed, but the memory of that night never fully faded for either Luke or Tala. Life moved on for both of them in different ways. Yet the quiet bond formed in that small shelter stayed gently in their hearts, as if it waited for the right time to appear again. For Tala, that night was more than a rescue. It was a moment that opened her eyes to kindness outside her own people. For Luke, it was a reminder that compassion could bridge any distance, even between two lives that rarely crossed. Tala returned to her community after she healed. Her people welcomed her warmly, surprised to see her return safely after she had been missing. They asked where she had been and who had helped her. And though she gave them a simple explanation, she kept many details in her heart. She spoke of a kind cowboy who had found her and made sure she survived the cold desert night. Some of her people were cautious at first. They did not trust outsiders easily. But Tala told them that kindness could come from unexpected places, and her calm voice often convinced others to see past old fears. As time went on, Tala became known as a skilled healer among her people. She cared for children, elders, and anyone who came to her with injuries or sickness. Her hands were gentle but strong, and she worked with quiet confidence. Sometimes, late at night, she sat outside her tent and looked at the stars, remembering the night she had looked up at them from a lonely canyon. She wondered how Luke was doing, whether he was safe, whether his ranch was still standing strong, whether he ever thought of her too. These thoughts came softly, without urgency, like a breeze carrying an old melody. Luke, in his own world, continued living the simple but steady life of a cowboy. He worked long hours on the ranch, fixing fences, feeding cattle, and guiding travelers when needed. People in the nearby town respected him. He was known as someone who stayed calm in difficult times and helped without asking for anything. But he kept to himself most of the time. He was friendly but quiet, never speaking much about personal matters. Still, whenever he rode past the canyon trail or saw a faint flicker of firelight in the distance, his mind returned to the night he had helped an Apache woman named Tala. Luke never expected to see her again. The desert was a big place, and their lives followed different paths. But every time he remembered the way she had whispered her thanks before sleeping, a small warmth filled his chest. It wasn't romance or longing, it was simply a gentle memory of a moment when two strangers helped each other feel safe in a dangerous world. Luke respected her strength and carried that memory as a quiet story he never shared with anyone. The years rolled forward. Seasons changed. Rain came and went. The sun burned the desert in summer and softened in winter. New settlers arrived, bringing new rules and new problems. Even though most people tried to live peacefully, misunderstandings sometimes happened between settlers and Apache groups. Tala heard of these troubles and always hoped things would improve. She believed deeply that people could learn to understand one another, even if it took time. During one difficult season, a drought settled over the land. Rivers shrank, grass dried, animals wandered far from their usual paths, and people began to worry. Without enough water, ranchers struggled to keep their cattle alive, and the Apache people found it harder to gather food. Both groups felt the pressure of survival, and tension rose quietly, like heat in the air. One day, Tala was sent with a small group to help gather medicinal plants near a trading post. She did not usually travel near settler areas unless necessary, but she believed that healing herbs might still be found near the riverbanks there. She moved with calm steps, carrying a small woven basket. Her long hair was tied back, and her eyes stayed alert as she walked. She remembered her people's warnings to be careful, but she also remembered that not everyone outside her tribe was unfriendly. Meanwhile, Luke had come to the same trading post to help guide a wagon caravan through a tough part of the trail. The drought had caused the land to shift, and travelers often needed someone who knew the safest routes. Luke was good at reading the land, so the job suited him well. He was speaking with a merchant when a familiar movement caught his eye. He noticed a woman walking near the river with a steady but graceful step. She bent down to examine a plant, her fingers touching it gently as if she could feel the earth's story through it. He frowned at first, trying to recognize the face. Then his heart made a small jump, something he was not used to feeling. It was Tala. Years had passed, yet he recognized her instantly. The way she carried herself, the calm but strong presence, the thoughtful look in her eyes, it was the same woman he had helped on that cold night. Luke stood still for a moment, unsure if he should call out to her. Maybe she would not remember him. Maybe it was best not to disturb her, but Tala felt someone watching her. She lifted her head and their eyes met. In that moment, the years between them seemed to shrink. She stood slowly, her basket held against her side. Her eyes widened in surprise, then softened with something like relief or gratitude. She took a few steps toward him, and Luke stepped forward too. "You," she said quietly, almost in disbelief. "It's you." Luke gave a small smile, the same gentle smile he had given her when he first helped her onto his horse. "It's me," he said softly. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Tala felt her heart warm in a way she hadn't expected. She had imagined this moment many times, wondering what she would say, how she would thank him again, how she would express the meaning that night had carried in her life. But now that he stood before her, words didn't come easily. She simply looked at him, taking in the familiar calmness she had remembered all these years. "I am glad you are well," she said finally. "And I'm glad to see you safe," Luke replied. They talked for a while, standing near the river as the sun stretched across the dried land. Tala told him a little about her work as a healer, how she traveled to gather plants and helped her people through the drought. Luke shared news about the ranch and the growing challenges of caring for cattle during water shortages. Their conversation flowed naturally, as if they had spoken many times before, even though it had been years since their last meeting. Tala felt a gentle peace speaking with him, as if she were reconnecting with a part of her past that had never fully left that shelter in the canyon. Luke, too, felt a quiet comfort. He realized he had missed her presence, even though he had known her for only one night so long ago. People around them noticed their conversation but paid little attention. To them, it was simply a cowboy talking with an Apache woman. To Luke and Tala, however, it felt like the world had given them a second chance to understand the moment that had shaped their memories. As the sun lowered in the sky, Tala knew she had to return to her group. Luke also needed to help the caravan before it became dark. But neither wanted the moment to end so quickly. They stood there, not knowing what to say next. Finally, Tala spoke softly. "I still remember that night." Luke nodded, understanding her meaning without needing more words. "So do I. So do I." They parted slowly, each walking back to their responsibilities, yet both feeling that something important had returned to their lives. The drought had brought many hardships, but it had also brought them back into each other's path, and neither of them knew that this meeting was only the beginning of something deeper waiting ahead. The drought continued to trouble the land in the days that followed, but Tala felt a strange sense of calm inside her after seeing Luke again. The moment had been unexpected, almost unreal, yet it had warmed her heart in a way she had not felt for years. She found herself thinking about his quiet smile, the gentle tone in his voice, and the steady way he listened when she spoke. She didn't usually let her memories take so much space in her mind, but seeing him again made something inside her settle peacefully. Luke felt much the same. As he guided the wagon caravan through a rough stretch of land, he kept recalling the moment Tala recognized him by the river. His life was usually built around routines, work, and quiet evenings. But now he found his thoughts drifting toward her more than he expected. He admired her strength, her calm presence, and the kindness in her eyes. She had changed over the years, not in spirit, but in maturity. She carried herself like someone who understood both hardship and peace. A week later, Luke returned to the trading post to help unload supplies. The sun was bright, the air was dusty, and the work was tiring, but he didn't complain. He rarely did. While he was busy arranging feed sacks, he heard familiar footsteps approaching. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Something in the quiet, steady rhythm of those steps reminded him instantly of Tala. When he finally looked up, she was standing a few feet away, holding her woven basket. Her expression was calm but warm, like she had hoped to see him again. Luke wiped his hands on his trousers and gave her a small smile. "Back for more herbs?" he asked lightly. "Not today," she replied, her voice soft. "I came because I wanted to speak with you. If you have time." Luke nodded immediately. He had time. Even if he didn't, he would have made some. He told one of the workers he would return shortly, and then walked with Tala toward the quiet riverbank. It was the same place they had met a week earlier, but now it felt different, more comfortable, more familiar, like they belonged there together. They sat on a large, smooth rock near the water. The river was low because of the drought, but its gentle sound still brought a sense of peace. For a moment, they both sat quietly, simply listening to the calm movement of the water. "I thought maybe you had returned home," Luke said. "I did," Tala answered. "But I came back today because I felt our first meeting after so many years was too short. There was more I wanted to say." Luke watched her closely. She rarely wasted words. If she had come back to speak, it meant she carried something important in her heart. "What did you want to say?" he asked gently. Tala took a breath, not nervous, but thoughtful. "I never told you how much that night changed my life," she said. "I was younger then strong, but careless. I believed I could face anything alone. But when I fell and hurt my ankle, I learned how quickly life can become dangerous. And then you appeared." Luke lowered his eyes for a moment. He didn't see himself as someone who deserved praise. He had simply helped someone who needed help. "I just did what anyone should do," he said quietly. Tala shook her head softly. "Many people might have passed without stopping. You did not. You carried me, protected me, stayed awake the whole night. so nothing would harm me. I could not forget that. Her voice was sincere. Luke felt her gratitude not as a heavy thing, but as something warm and humble. He looked at her again and saw not just the woman he had rescued years ago, but someone who had grown into a wise and respected healer. "I've thought about you too," Luke admitted. "Not constantly, but often enough to wonder how life treated you. You seemed strong even when you were hurt. I knew you would become someone important." A soft smile touched Tala's lips. Compliments rarely reached her heart. But Luke's words felt honest, not exaggerated. They spoke about simple things for a while: how the drought was affecting her people, how the ranchers were managing, how both sides were trying to avoid misunderstandings despite the harsh conditions. Luke told her about long days on the ranch, repairing fences and searching for water sources. Tala described her work treating dried skin, fevers, and the many people who came to her seeking help during the tough season. Their words flowed smoothly, as though they had been speaking regularly for years. After some time, Tala asked if he wanted to walk along the river. Luke agreed, and they moved slowly over the sand and stones. She didn't hurry. She simply enjoyed the quiet company. He matched her pace without complaint. The sky above them was turning golden, the kind of glow that made the world look softer than usual. "You seem quieter today," Luke said after a few minutes. Tala nodded. "I have been thinking a lot," she admitted. "Sometimes our lives feel like separate paths that are not meant to cross again. But then something happens that makes us meet once more. It makes me wonder why." Luke felt the same curiosity. "Maybe life gives us chances we're supposed to understand," he said. They continued walking until they reached a shaded area under a tall cottonwood tree. Tala set her basket down and sat on the cool ground. Luke sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them yet still close enough to speak comfortably. She picked up a small stone and studied it between her fingers. "Luke," she said softly, "I hope you do not think I am strange for returning today. I simply felt I could not ignore the feeling inside me. When I saw you again, it reminded me how important that night was. I never properly told you what it meant." Luke shook his head. "I'm glad you came back. I don't think you're strange at all. I'm grateful, actually. It's rare to have someone remember a kindness that long." Tala looked at him with warm eyes. "Some moments stay in the heart even when years pass," she said, "and some people stay too." Her words touched him deeply, though he didn't show it with dramatic expressions. Luke was a man of steady emotions. But inside, something shifted gently. He realized that he wasn't talking to a passing stranger. He was reconnecting with someone who had carried a piece of his memory through the years, just as he had carried hers. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above them. Tala leaned back slightly, letting the wind cool her face. Luke watched her for a moment, noticing the peacefulness she carried with her. She didn't rush, didn't push, didn't demand. She simply existed with calm strength. And that alone made her presence comforting. "Will you be returning home tonight?" Luke asked. "Maybe tomorrow," Tala replied. "My group will camp near the hills. I wanted one more quiet evening before going back." Luke nodded. He didn't want the moment to end yet either, though he didn't say it aloud. They stayed under the tree until the sun dipped lower. They shared stories, not dramatic ones, just memories of simple days, hard lessons, and small joys. Luke spoke about the ranch dog who followed him everywhere. Tala laughed softly at that, imagining a loyal animal trotting behind the calm cowboy. Tala spoke of children in her community who liked to run around her tent, asking for stories or playing small games. Luke found the image heartwarming. By the time they stood up to leave, the world around them had grown peaceful and cool. Tala picked up her basket, and Luke walked with her, back toward the trading post where their paths would separate again. But this time, something felt different. They had not simply met, they had reconnected, understood each other, and opened the door to something deeper, even if neither named it yet. Before parting, Tala turned to him and said quietly, "I hope this is not the last time we meet." Luke looked into her eyes, steady and kind. "It won't be," he said softly. They walked away in different directions, but both carried the same quiet hope in their hearts. The evening after Tala and Luke last met stayed in both of their minds like a calm echo they could not ignore. They returned to their own worlds, but the quiet connection between them only grew stronger. Tala's group camped near the low hills for the night, and she found herself sitting alone beneath the stars, thinking about each moment she had spent with Luke that day. His gentle voice, his calm presence, his steady nature, all of it lingered in her thoughts. She wrapped her blanket around her shoulders and looked at the moon climbing the sky. She remembered sitting under similar moonlight years ago when Luke had kept watch so nothing would harm her. That memory, still bright in her heart, made her realize she had carried more gratitude, more emotion, than she ever allowed herself to admit. Luke rode home slowly after they parted. Even his horse sensed something different in him. He wasn't distracted, but he was quieter than usual, thinking deeply. The trail back to the ranch felt longer than normal because his mind kept drifting back to the sound of Tala's laugh, the warmth in her eyes, and the way she spoke about memories she had kept for years. Luke rarely let emotions take over his thoughts, but Tala had a way of bringing stillness to his mind like a soft wind that settled the dust of long days. The next morning, Tala's group prepared to move back toward their main camp. Some of the women packed their bags, and the men checked the condition of the horses. Tala helped where needed, though her thoughts remained partly elsewhere. One of the elders noticed her calm but thoughtful expression and approached her. "You seem quiet, Tala," the elder said gently. Tala offered a small smile. "Just thinking, grandmother, about the cowboy you saw again?" the elder asked with surprising accuracy. Tala's eyes widened just a little, then softened. "Yes," she admitted. "He saved my life years ago. I saw him again, and it felt meaningful." The elder nodded with understanding. "Sometimes, people return to our lives for a reason. Do not ignore what your heart understands, even if your mind does not." Tala appreciated the wisdom. Elders rarely spoke without purpose. She bowed her head respectfully, then returned to help the others. Meanwhile, Luke spent the day at his ranch repairing a broken fence. His hands worked steadily, but his mind drifted often. Every time he hammered a nail or tightened a rope, he remembered pieces of his conversation with Tala. He remembered how she said some moments stayed in the heart even when years passed. He remembered how she looked when she spoke about gratitude and change. He wondered when he would see her again, and if she felt the same quiet hope he felt. By afternoon, as the heat rose, Luke decided he would ride out toward the hills where Tala's group had been camping. He didn't fully understand why. He only knew that if this connection meant something to her too, he didn't want distance to make it fade again. He saddled his horse and rode out with steady determination. At the same time, Tala's group began their journey home. Tala walked beside one of the pack horses, her basket tied carefully to its saddle. Even as she moved, she kept glancing toward the open land behind them, almost as if she was expecting someone. She didn't speak this thought aloud, but her heart carried a quiet expectation. After several hours of travel, her group stopped near a shaded area to rest. Tala took a moment to breathe, letting the cool shade give her comfort. As she bent to pick up her water pouch, she heard distant hoofbeats approaching. Her heart lifted before she even saw who it was. When she finally turned, her breath caught softly. Luke was riding toward them. He slowed his horse as he reached her group, making sure not to appear threatening. Tala's people watched him with cautious eyes, but Tala stepped forward, her calm presence easing the tension. Luke met her gaze, and the quiet happiness in her eyes made the long ride worth it. "You came," Tala said softly, almost whispering. "I hoped I would find you," Luke replied. "I wasn't ready for our last conversation to be the end." Her heart warmed at his honesty. She motioned for him to sit with her near the shade while the others rested. Some of her people remained watchful, but none interfered. They had faith in Tala's judgment. Luke sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "You are not," she replied, and her voice carried reassurance. "I'm glad you came." They spoke again. this time, with deeper honesty. Tala told him what she had kept inside for years. She described how that night of rescue had become a guiding memory for her. She explained that she didn't forget it because of fear, but because of the kindness a stranger had shown her without hesitation. She told him that whenever she helped people as a healer, a small part of her remembered the compassion he had shown her. "I could not forget that night," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Not because of the pain, but because it changed something in me. It showed me that not all people outside my world are distant or cold. That there is good everywhere, even where we do not expect it." Luke listened quietly, moved by how deeply she had carried that memory. He wasn't used to hearing such open emotion directed toward him. He had always lived humbly, never thinking of his actions as something worthy of remembering. But hearing Tala speak made him understand how much that one act of kindness had meant. "I didn't know it stayed with you this long," Luke admitted. "I only hoped you lived a good life after that." Tala smiled gently. "I did. And your kindness was part of that." They sat together under the shade, their thoughts intertwining naturally. Tala felt comfortable speaking to him, as if her heart trusted him without question. Luke felt the same. Her presence brought him peace that he rarely felt around others. After a while, Tala's people prepared to continue their journey. Before they left, Tala stepped closer to Luke. She looked into his eyes, and in that moment, she spoke with her heart rather than her mind. "I don't want this connection to end again," she said quietly. "If our paths cross twice, maybe they are meant to cross more." Luke's eyes softened. "I feel the same." Tala gently reached out and touched his arm, not as a romantic gesture but as a gesture of trust. Luke felt the meaning of that touch. She respected him, cared for him, and trusted him deeply. "Will you visit again?" she asked. "Whenever I can," Luke promised. Her group began to move, and Tala walked backward for a few steps, her eyes still on him. Luke remained standing under the shade, watching her leave, feeling something deep inside him settle gently. As Tala joined her group again, one of the younger women whispered, "You trust him?" Tala nodded softly. "He earned that trust long ago." The young woman smiled. "Then perhaps this story is not finished." Tala looked up at the sky, where the light shifted through thin clouds. She felt hope rising inside her, steady and warm. And Luke, riding slowly back home, felt the same hope. He no longer saw that night from years ago as a single moment. He now saw it as the beginning of something that life had patiently carried forward until both of them were ready to understand it. Their hearts, once strangers, now moved quietly toward one another slowly, gently, and with a sincerity neither could deny. Weeks passed after Luke visited Tala's group, and life slowly began to show small signs of change across the land. The drought, while still severe, loosened slightly as a few clouds appeared now and then, offering gentle shades of hope. People learned to adjust. Ranchers dug deeper wells, and the Apache community found hidden springs. Even though the land was still hard, the people living on it were finding new ways to survive. Through all this, Luke and Tala kept their quiet promise. They met whenever the land allowed. Sometimes it was at the trading post, sometimes near the riverbank, and sometimes in the open fields where their worlds overlapped. Each meeting carried the same calm, warm feeling that had grown between them with surprising ease. They didn't rush their friendship. They simply let it unfold naturally, as if guided by something wiser than either of them. One bright morning, Tala walked with a small group toward the trading post again. She needed herbs and cloth for her healing work. The moment she reached the post, she recognized Luke sitting under the shade of the wooden roof, repairing a saddle. He looked up as she approached, and his face relaxed into the gentle smile she had grown familiar with. His smile wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, warm, and filled with sincerity. "You arrived earlier than I expected," Luke said. Tala returned the smile. "And you stayed longer than you said you would. It seemed like today might be a day worth staying." Tala felt her heart warm at his simple words. Luke never spoke in dramatic ways, but every word he said felt solid and true. Her people had taught her long ago that truth lived not in how loudly someone spoke, but in how genuinely they lived. Luke's truth showed in his steady actions, his calm patience, and his quiet understanding. They walked together toward the riverbank, which was beginning to show a thin line of new water after weeks of dryness. The sight brought Tala relief. She crouched beside the water, touching the soft mud that had formed near the edge. "Maybe the land will breathe easier soon," she said. "Maybe we all will," Luke replied. They sat on a fallen log, listening to the soft trickle of water. Tala turned slightly toward him, watching the way he studied the river with a thoughtful expression. She admired how he observed the world quietly, without judgment. He didn't try to push his opinions or take up more space than needed, he simply existed with respect for everything around him. Luke looked at her too. He noticed how her eyes reflected calm strength, how she listened not only to words but to the silence between them, how she carried wisdom that came from years of helping others. Every time he saw her, he understood why that long-ago night had stayed in his memory. Tala wasn't just someone he had helped. She was someone whose spirit left a lasting mark. After a while, Tala took a small breath and looked at him with a seriousness he didn't often see. "There is something I haven't told you," she said quietly. Luke straightened slightly, attentive but calm. "What is it?" Tala placed her hands gently on her knees, thinking before speaking. "When I was younger, before you found me that night, I believed the world was simple. My people here, your people there. I believed we should not mix, that we had nothing in common. But when you helped me, everything changed slowly. I realized how narrow my view had been." Luke listened, not interrupting. "For years," she continued, "I carried that night in my heart. Not because of fear or pain, but because it opened a door. It taught me to see kindness even where I least expected it. I became a better healer because of that. I judged less. I listened more. And now," she paused, searching his eyes, "now I see that some paths return for a reason." Luke felt something shift inside him. He had always wondered what their meeting had meant to her. Hearing it now, this openly, touched him deeply. "I never wanted anything in return for helping you," he said softly, "but knowing it made your life better, that means more to me than you know." Tala smiled gently. "And knowing you are still the same kind man from years ago means more to me than I expected." For a long moment, neither spoke. They didn't need words to understand what grew quietly between them. Trust. Respect. A bond built not in haste but in steady steps over time. Just then, a group of travelers passed by, waving hello to Luke. He nodded politely before turning back to Tala. "You've become important to your people," he said. "They rely on you." Tala nodded. "And your ranch relies on you." "You're right. But somewhere in all that responsibility, there is still space for the people who matter." The words slipped out before Luke could stop himself, but he didn't regret them. Tala looked at him, her expression softening in a way that made his quiet heart feel unexpectedly full. "You matter too, Luke," she said gently. He felt the sincerity of her words reach him deeply. Luke wasn't used to hearing such things. Most of his life had been spent helping others, expecting nothing in return, but Tala's words were like water to dry soil. They brought something inside him back to life. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking beneath the cottonwood trees. Sometimes, Tala spoke of her childhood, telling him stories about learning healing skills from her grandmother. Luke shared simple memories from the ranch, his first horse, the storms he had survived, the long rides that shaped his character. They laughed softly at small things and paused at memories that carried weight. With each story, they learned more about each other. Not in a rushed way but like pieces of a puzzle falling gently into place. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with warm colors, Tala knew she had to return to her group. But she didn't stand immediately. She looked at Luke with an expression full of calm certainty. "There is one more thing I want to say," she whispered. Luke leaned forward slightly, listening. "I could not forget that night," Tala said, her voice steady and soft. "Not because I was weak or afraid, but because it showed me that people can meet for a moment and be changed forever. You changed my life that night, Luke, and seeing you again these past weeks has changed it once more." Luke felt the truth of her words settle warmly in his chest. He didn't respond right away, not because he lacked words, but because he wanted to honor the depth of what she said. Finally, he answered, "You changed me too, Tala. You showed me strength I had never seen before. And meeting you again, it feels like something life wanted to happen." She smiled quietly at that. It wasn't a dramatic smile, but a deep, peaceful one, full of understanding and gratitude. They walked back toward the trading post slowly, side by side. When they reached the edge where their paths separated, Tala stopped. She looked at him once more, her eyes warm under the fading light. "This is not an ending," she said softly. Luke nodded. "No, it isn't." They parted with quiet certainty, both knowing their connection would continue to grow in its own rhythm, slow, steady, honest, and free from the weight of the past. As Luke rode home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that tomorrow held something gentle and good. Tala, walking back to her people, felt the same. Their story didn't end with a dramatic moment. It continued with two hearts moving closer. Guided by kindness, respect, and the memory of one night that neither of them could forget, a night that had shaped their lives, then returned years later to shape them once more, and this time, neither of them walked away from it.